The Remington's report cut through the mountain silence like a thunderclap, followed by a stillness so profound even the pine trees seemed to hold their breath. Nathaniel Reed's scarred hands never wavered on the reins. His granite-grey eyes, fixed on the 5 masked riders blocking the mountain pass ahead. 8 years had passed since he'd last squeezed a trigger in earnest, 8 years of seeking absolution through honest labor. But as the outlaws spread across the narrow trail, bandanas pulled high over their faces, he knew that some debts can only be paid in lead and blood. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Morning mist clung to the foothills as Nathaniel Reed prepared the day's coach for its journey north through Clearwater Pass. His movements were methodical, each check of wheel and harness performed with the quiet precision that had defined his 5 years driving the Mountain Express line. The tall, lean driver worked alone, preferring the solitude of early preparations to the bustle that would soon overtake Pinewood Station. "Looks to be another fine day for traveling, Mr. Reed," called Catherine Hargrove from the station's covered porch, where she sorted through the day's mail deliveries. The postmistress had become one of the few people in Pinewood whom Nathaniel had allowed past his carefully constructed walls of silence. Her keen intelligence and lack of intrusive questions had gradually earned what little trust he still offered. "To anyone. Weather holds, it should be," he replied, his voice carrying the soft lilt of his native Appalachian roots rather than the flatter tones of these western territories. Though those clouds gathering to the north might argue otherwise before day's end, the stage station was stirring to life around them as the morning advanced. Station Master Gerald Powell emerged from his office with the day's passenger manifest, while 2 stable hands led the 6-horse team into position. The familiar rhythm of these preparations had become Nathaniel's sanctuary, a carefully structured routine that left little room for the memories that sometimes still haunted his dreams. "Light passenger count today," Powell announced, scanning his papers through wire-rimmed spectacles. Just the banker Holloway heading to Fort Collins, and the new schoolteacher Miss Winters making her way to Elkhorn. "Mailbags heavy, though? Seems everyone's writing to someone these days." Nathaniel nodded, grateful for the simplicity of the work that had become his life. There was a certain peace in these morning preparations, in the honest labor of carrying people and parcels across the rugged landscape. It was vastly different from the life he'd led before, when men had whispered his name, the Ghost, across Colorado mining camps and frontier settlements with equal measures of awe and terror. The passengers arrived as the station clock struck 7. Milton Holloway, portly and perpetually concerned about his timepiece, offered a curt greeting before climbing aboard. The young schoolteacher, Emma Winters, approached with more warmth, her eyes bright with the adventure of her new position. "Despite the early hour, first time through the pass, Miss Winters?" Nathaniel asked, helping her with her modest luggage. "Yes, though I've heard the views are spectacular," she replied. "I confess I'm a bit nervous about the journey. I've heard stories about the old Blackwell gang operating in these mountains." Something flickered behind Nathaniel's eyes, just for a moment, before his expression returned to its usual impassive calm. "Most tales grow taller with each telling," he said. "Root's been quiet for years now." As he climbed to the driver's box, Nathaniel's hand brushed against the worn leather of his coat, feeling the reassuring outline of what lay concealed within its specially tailored inner pocket. The custom Remington 1875, with its distinctive ivory grip, remained hidden from view, its presence a reluctant concession to the realities of the mountain trails, rather than a connection to his former life. Few in Pinewood Station knew that their quiet, reliable stage driver had once been known throughout the territories as Nathaniel "Ghost" Reed, the man whose marksmanship had become legend during his years with the Pinkerton Detective Agency. Even fewer knew about the bloodshed at Silver Creek Mine that had left him with a collection of scars, both visible and hidden. or how he'd walked away from violence and vanished into the anonymity of honest work. "All secure, Mr. Reed," young Billy Powell called up, the station master's son having completed his inspection of the undercarriage. At 13, the boy reminded Nathaniel of himself at that age, before war and loss had set him on a path of bloodshed and eventual redemption. "All set, Billy. Be sure to help your father with those new horses this afternoon." With a practiced flick of the reins, Nathaniel set the 6-horse team in motion. The stagecoach rolled past the last buildings of Pinewood Station, the morning sun warming his shoulders as the familiar trail stretched northward. The first leg would take them to Hawks Ridge Way Station, a 4-hour run through increasingly rugged country that had once been frequented by road agents and renegade bands, though those dangers had seemed distant in recent years. Inside the coach, he could hear Miss Winters asking Holloway about life in the mountain communities. The bankers, clipped responses, a stark contrast to the young woman's enthusiasm. Their conversation created a comfortable backdrop to the journey as Nathaniel settled into the meditative rhythm of managing the team across the uneven terrain. As they crossed Eagle Creek, its waters running high with spring snowmelt, Nathaniel allowed himself a rare moment of contentment. 5 years ago, he had arrived in Pinewood Station with nothing but nightmares and a desperate need to disappear. The small community had offered what he'd never expected to find, a chance to be measured by his daily labors rather than the violence of his past. The stage climbed steadily through stands of lodgepole pine, the air growing cooler as they gained elevation. Through occasional breaks in the forest, Nathaniel could see the jagged peaks of the Clearwater Range rising in the distance, their snow-capped summits gleaming against the blue sky. It was in that moment of appreciation for the landscape's beauty that he first noticed the dust cloud on the horizon, moving with purpose along a rarely used hunting trail that would intersect their route just ahead. Nathaniel's eyes narrowed as he counted the riders, 5 of them, pushing their horses hard across the difficult terrain. His right hand twitched slightly, muscle memory from years of reading Trouble on the Wind, but he forced himself to remain calm. Not every approaching rider meant danger, he reminded himself, though something in their formation triggered warnings. A honed through years of survival might be getting some company, he called down to his passengers, keeping his tone conversational despite the tension beginning to build between his shoulder blades. Inside the coach, the conversation fell silent. "Trouble, Mr. Reed?" came Holloway's concerned query. "Just some riders coming in from the East Trail." "Probably hunters," Nathaniel replied, though his eyes never left the approaching party, noting with growing concern how they spread out as they neared the main road. As the morning sun caught the metal of gun barrels barely concealed beneath duster coats, the familiar cold clarity began to settle over Nathaniel Reed. Some men spent their entire lives trying to outrun who they had been. For 5 years, he'd believed that the ghost of his former self had finally been laid to rest in this quiet corner of the mountains. But as the riders drew closer, their intentions becoming clear in the way they positioned themselves to block the road, he realized that sometimes the past had plans of its own. The coach rounded a sharp bend in the trail, and there they were. 5 riders arrayed across the narrow pass, bandanas pulled up to mask their faces. Their horses were dark with sweat, testament to a hard cross-country ride to reach this perfect ambush point. Nathaniel drew the stage to a halt, his mind calculating distances and angles with the automatic precision that had once been as natural as breathing. "That's far enough, driver," called the center rider, a broad-shouldered man whose voice carried the hard edge of command. "We'll be relieving you of any valuables today." Nathaniel's eyes moved methodically across the group, noting positions and weaponry. The leader wore his gun cavalry style, suggesting military background. Two others to the right appeared nervous, their horses shifting restlessly beneath them, inexperienced, but perhaps more dangerous for it. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us now. Back to the story. The remaining pair to the left maintained professional stillness, their eyes constantly scanning for threats. These were no common road agents. "Afternoon, gentlemen," Nathaniel said, his mountain drawl more pronounced than usual as he played the role of simple stage driver. "Afraid you've picked a poor target. Just carrying mail and 2 passengers today. School teacher and a banker." The leader's horse stepped forward. "It's not the passengers we're interested in. It's what's in your strongbox. Territorial payroll. For the Fort Collins garrison. Now open it up before things get unpleasant." A cold certainty settled in Nathaniel's gut. The army payroll had indeed arrived at Pinewood Station the previous night, but Station Master Powell had arranged for it to travel on the following day's stage with a cavalry escort. These men had accurate intelligence, but not complete information, which suggested an inside source. "Check the box, Decker," the leader ordered, and one of the nervous riders dismounted, spurs jingling as he approached the rear of the coach. Inside, Miss Winters had begun praying quietly. Nathaniel could feel Holloway's anxious gaze through the coach window. They were his responsibility, these passengers who had placed their safety in his hands. "Folks," he called down softly, "when I give the word, I need you both to get down on the floor of the coach and stay there." The outlaw named Decker reached for the strongbox mounted behind the rear boot, his hand never completing the motion. In one fluid movement that belied years of deliberate disuse, Nathaniel's Remington appeared in his hand, aimed with unwavering precision. "Son," he said quietly, "I wouldn't." The leader's eyes narrowed, then widened with sudden recognition. "Well, I'll be damned," he breathed, then laughed sharply. "Boys, do you know who we're dealing with? This here's the ghost himself." Decker froze, his face visibly paling even behind his bandana. Even here, it seemed, some legends refused to die. "That was a lifetime ago," Nathaniel replied, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent mountain pass. "I'm just a stage driver now, but I'm still responsible for my passengers and cargo, so I'm giving you all one chance to ride away." The leader's laugh held no humor. "The ghost! 10 years back that name might have meant something. Now you're just an old man playing at honest work. 5 guns against 1, friend. Those odds don't favor you." "Down!" Nathaniel barked to his passengers. And then the world exploded into motion. The leader was good, his gun clearing leather with impressive speed. But Nathaniel Reed hadn't earned his nickname through exaggeration. His first shot took the leader's gun arm at the shoulder, sending the man's hasty return fire harmlessly into the canopy of pines. Decker, still near the strongbox, fumbled for his pistol with the panicked movements of someone facing their worst nightmare. Nathaniel's second shot struck the outlaw's revolver, sending it spinning into the dirt. The remaining 3 bandits managed to fire, bullets splintering wood around the driver's box, but Nathaniel had already shifted position. 3 more precisely placed shots rang out in rapid succession, each finding its target with surgical accuracy. A weapon hand, a shoulder, a saddle horn that sent its rider tumbling to the ground. Not one shot aimed to kill. The entire exchange had taken less than 5 seconds. "Jesus Christ," Decker whispered, cradling his stinging hand as he stared up at the stage driver with dawning comprehension. The leader lay in the dust, cursing through clenched teeth, while his companions froze in various states of shock and injury. "There's a doctor in Pinewood Station," Nathaniel said, his voice unchanged from its earlier calm. "About 3 hours. Back the way you came. I'd suggest you help your friends mount up and head that way before blood loss becomes a concern." For several long moments, the only sounds were the wounded men's ragged breathing and the nervous shuffling of horses. Inside the coach, Miss Winters had stopped praying. Nathaniel kept the Remington steady, watching as the outlaws gradually recovered enough composure to help their wounded leader back into his saddle. "You could have killed us all," the leader managed through pale lips as his men prepared to depart. "Yes," Nathaniel agreed simply. "I could have." He didn't add that the man he'd been 8 years ago would have done exactly that. The stage driver had learned mercy in ways the Pinkerton detective never had. It took the outlaws nearly 10 minutes to get mounted up, their former confidence replaced by the subdued movements of men who had brushed too close to their own mortality. Decker, the youngest, looked back once before they rode east, his eyes wide with the kind of fear that would fuel frontier legends for years to come. Only when their dust had settled did Nathaniel finally return the Remington to its hidden holster, its weight both familiar and foreign against his ribs. His hands were steady, but something inside him trembled like a leaf in autumn wind. 5 years of peace shattered by 5 seconds of violence. "My word, Mr. Reed," Miss Winters said shakily as she emerged from the floor of the coach. "I had no idea. Are you both all right?" he interrupted deliberately, turning the conversation away from himself. "Thanks to you," Holloway replied, his usual businesslike demeanor replaced by genuine awe. "I've heard stories about the ghost, but I always assumed they were frontier tall tales." Nathaniel managed a small smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Most stories grow in the telling, Mr. Holloway. Best not to believe everything you hear." But as he clucked the horses back into motion, Nathaniel felt the weight of the Remington more heavily than he had in years. Word would spread from this day's events. The ghost was still alive, still deadly. The quiet life he had built for himself in Pinewood Station might have just grown considerably more complicated. The stagecoach rolled northward under the mountain sun, and Nathaniel Reed wondered if a man could ever truly choose who he was, or if some identities went soul-deep, permanent as bullet scars and twice as binding. The answers, like the distant peaks, stretched out before him, and all he could do was drive on and meet them as they came. Hours passed on the mountain trail as the afternoon shadows lengthened against the pines. The encounter with the outlaws had unsettled the usual rhythms of Nathaniel's journey, leaving a palpable tension that even the horses seemed to feel, their ears flicking nervously at every snapping twig. Inside the coach, Miss Winters had fallen into a contemplative silence, while Holloway alternated between checking his pocket watch and peering anxiously through the window. Nathaniel's thoughts kept returning to the young outlaw Decker, to the recognition and fear that had drained the color from his face. He'd seen that look before, in Denver, in Cheyenne, in a dozen territories where the whispered legends of the ghost had preceded him. It was the look of someone whose nightmares had suddenly materialized in flesh and blood. As the stagecoach crested Pine Saddle Ridge, the trail opened to reveal the sweeping valley below, where Hawks Ridge Way Station nestled in a clearing halfway to their destination. Nathaniel noted something off about the usual bustle of the remote outpost. The afternoon stage from Fort Collins should have been visible on the approach, but the station yard stood empty save for a single saddled horse tied at the hitching post. "Something ain't right," he muttered, drawing the team to a halt. 50 yards from the station, that familiar prickle of warning climbing his spine like a winter chill. "Is there a problem, Mr. Reed?" Miss Winters leaned from the window, her earlier fear replaced by genuine concern. Before Nathaniel could answer, a rifle shot cracked from the station building, the bullet whistling past, missing the driver's box by inches. In the same instant, riders emerged from behind the station, not 5 this time, but 8, all armed and moving with practiced coordination. "Those boys worked faster than I expected," Nathaniel said quietly, recognizing the implications. The outlaws from earlier hadn't just been operating on good intelligence about the payroll. They'd had a deeper plan in place. "Ghost," a voice called from the station. "That was just to get your attention. Step down from that box and away from the stage." Nathaniel's mind raced. 8 guns now, not 5, and his passengers still at risk. The odds had just worsened considerably, But as he studied the positions of the gunmen, a strategy began taking shape. Sometimes, he reflected, a reputation could be as useful as a loaded weapon. The standoff at Hawk's Ridge stretched taut as a bowstring in the mountain air. Nathaniel's mind calculated angles and positions, the old arithmetic of survival returning as naturally as breathing. These weren't common bandits. They moved with military precision. "I won't ask again, Reed." The voice from the station carried authority, practiced command. "Your reputation isn't worth dying for." Nathaniel's response was to carefully climb down from the driver's box, his movements deliberate and unhurried. "Miss Winters, Mr. Holloway, stay inside and keep low." His boots crunched on the gravel as he walked several paces from the stage, creating distance that would draw attention away from his passengers. "Wise choice," the voice approved as a figure emerged from the shadows of the station porch. The man who stepped into the light was tall and lean, with a cavalry officer's bearing despite his civilian clothes. A distinctive scar ran from his left temple to his jaw, cutting through a neatly trimmed beard. Recognition hit Nathaniel like a physical blow. "Major Victor Sullivan," he said quietly. "Thought you were still serving time in Leavenworth." Sullivan's thin smile never reached his eyes. "War Department decided my skills were more valuable outside prison walls, Ghost. Seems we have similar stories, both of us finding new lives after Silver Creek. Though I see you've chosen a considerably humbler path. Silver Creek Mine." The name alone conjured images that Nathaniel had spent years trying to forget. The flashes of gunfire in darkened tunnels, the screams of miners caught in the crossfire between Sullivan's mercenaries and Nathaniel's Pinkerton detail. The mine collapse that had buried evidence of the gold shipment Sullivan had tried to steal. "The war's been over a long time, Major," Nathaniel said evenly. Sullivan's laugh was sharp as broken glass. "Some wars never end, Ghost. You made sure of that when you put me away for 7 years." "You were executing civilian witnesses," Nathaniel replied, his voice hardening slightly. "I was eliminating security risks," Sullivan snapped, his composure momentarily cracking. "And you gunned down my men like they were rabid dogs." The other gunmen had edged closer during the exchange, their weapons trained on Nathaniel. Among them, he recognized Decker from their earlier encounter, his bandaged hand, testament to their previous meeting. The young man's eyes now held a mixture of fear and vengeful anticipation. "I count 8 guns against 1, Sullivan continued, regaining his calm. "Even the legendary Ghost can't beat those odds, but I'm a sportsman. Throw down your weapon, and I'll let your passengers ride away unharmed before we finish our business." Inside, the coach, Miss Winters, had begun another prayer, her voice barely audible across the yard. Nathaniel's hand hung near his coat, time stretching like molasses as his mind replayed the Silver Creek disaster, the desperate stand in the mine office, the unexpected collapse, the burial of evidence that had made the case against Sullivan so difficult to prove. "I fear no evil." Miss Winters' voice grew stronger, the familiar psalm carrying through the tense air. "Times change, Sullivan," Nathaniel said softly. "Men can too if they're given the chance." "Not all men," Sullivan replied, his hand dropping to his holster. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion, each moment crystalline in the mountain light. Sullivan was fast, his draw a testament to years of practice even during his imprisonment, but Nathaniel had already begun to move. The first shot came from behind the station, an unauthorized warning from one of Sullivan's less disciplined men, and in that moment of chaos, the Ghost emerged from his long slumber. Nathaniel's first bullet caught the shooter behind the station. His second found Decker's remaining good hand before the young outlaw could level his weapon. As Nathaniel rolled behind a water trough, 2 more shots sent Sullivan's flanking gunmen scrambling for cover. "For thou art with me." Miss Winters's prayer rose above the gunfire as Sullivan's bullets splintered wood inches from Nathaniel's head. Another. Shot rang out, pain blossoming along Nathaniel's ribs. A graze, nothing more. 4 shots remained in the Remington, 4 targets still in play. "Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me," came the continued psalm, now joined unexpectedly by Holloway's deeper voice, their words a surreal counterpoint to the gunfight. Sullivan emerged from cover, both guns blazing in a display of the skill that had once made him the Army's premier firearms instructor. Nathaniel's returned fire caught him high in the chest, spinning the former major halfway around. Sullivan's shots went wide, kicking up dust as he staggered backward. "Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies." The prayer continued from the coach. The remaining gunmen, seeing their leader fall, broke and ran for their horses. Nathaniel let them go, his gun trained on Sullivan's prone form as the station yard fell silent except for the thunder of retreating hoofbeats and the final words of the psalm. "Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life." Nathaniel approached Sullivan carefully, keeping his weapon ready. The former major lay gasping in the dust, blood spreading across his fine Eastern-cut coat. His eyes, when they met Nathaniel's, held neither fear nor acceptance, only the same burning hatred that had fueled him through years of imprisonment. "Finish it, Ghost," Sullivan wheezed, "like you finished my men at Silver Creek." Instead, Nathaniel knelt beside his fallen enemy. "The war's over, Major, has been for a long time. Let it rest." "Never!" Blood flecked Sullivan's lips. "Others will come. Old debts don't die easily." "No," Nathaniel agreed softly, "but men do, unless they learn to let them go." He stayed with Sullivan until the end, watching as the hatred in those eyes slowly faded to confusion, and then to a final empty stillness. When it was done, Nathaniel stood slowly, feeling every one of his years in the ache of old wounds and fresh injuries. "And I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever," Miss Winters finished her psalm, the words hanging in the mountain air like a benediction. Nathaniel checked the station and found the regular staff tied up in the barn, shaken but unharmed. As he helped free them, Miss Winters and Holloway emerged cautiously from the coach, their faces pale but composed after the violence they had witnessed. "You did what you had to," Miss Winters said quietly, looking at Sullivan's body. "God's mercy works through many hands, Mr. Reed, even blood-stained ones. Especially those," Nathaniel replied softly, "for they know best the price of violence and the value of mercy." As the station hands began to restore order, Nathaniel found himself staring north toward Fort Collins and the mountains beyond. The sheer ghost of his former self had risen again today, and he wondered how many more old debts would come calling before he could truly find peace. But for now, there were passengers to deliver, a stage to drive, and miles of winding trail ahead. The past might never fully release its grip, but perhaps that was the price of redemption, to carry its weight until the burden became wisdom. As they prepared to continue their journey, Nathaniel discovered a leather document case among Sullivan's belongings. Inside, yellowed papers revealed a deeper conspiracy, maps marking stage routes, schedules, and a list of names. Some were crossed out, others circled in red ink. His own name was at the bottom, underlined twice. "Found something interesting in the Major's effects," the station master said, approaching with a territorial marshal's badge pinned to his vest. Seems he wasn't working alone. He handed Nathaniel a letter bearing an unfamiliar seal, a crowned, eagle-clutching arrows. The letter spoke of a group called the Watchmen, former military officers who had turned to organized crime during the chaos of post-war reconstruction, targeting those they blamed for their fall from grace. Sullivan had been their enforcer, but not their leader. "Territorial marshals been tracking them for months," the station master continued. "Might be interested in knowing what happened here today." Nathaniel folded the papers carefully. "Might," Be more interested in what's still to come. These men, he tapped the list of names, they're all like me, folks who testified against corrupt officials, tried to build new lives after. Vengeance dies hard in the territories. That it does, the station master agreed, but so do some of us who carry its weight. A fresh team was hitched, the stage ready to roll as Nathaniel climbed back to his seat. He felt the familiar weight of his Remington, but now it carried new meaning. The quiet life he'd built wasn't just his refuge anymore, it was a fortress. Others might need if the watchman came hunting. Fort Collins before sundown, Mr. Reed, Holloway asked as they pulled out, his voice steady despite all they'd witnessed. God willing, Nathaniel replied, though he knew now that peace would require more than prayer. The road north stretched before them, and somewhere out there, other enemies waited, men who wouldn't rest until the ghost was truly buried or their own twisted sense of justice was satisfied. Fort Collins loomed against the twilight sky, its wooden walls still holding the day's heat as Nathaniel guided the stage through the gates. The journey from Hawk's Ridge had been mercifully quiet, but the documents in his coat pocket weighed heavier than any bullet wound. "Stage from Pinewood," the sentry called out, torchlight flickering across his young face. "Been expecting you since noon." The delay at Hawk's Ridge had cost them hours, but Nathaniel noticed something odd in the soldier's tone, a tension that spoke of more than just a late arrival. As they pulled into the fort's staging area, he saw why. A dozen riders were saddled up, equipped for hard travel, with a familiar figure at their head. Reed, U.S. Marshal Clayton Ward, stepped forward, his voice carrying the authority of 15 years wearing the star. "Heard you had some trouble back at Hawk's Ridge." Nathaniel set the brake and climbed down slowly, conscious of the eyes watching from the fort's shadows. "News travels fast." "Faster than a stage sometimes," Ward gestured. "Toward the command building. Colonel Harrison wants a word inside." Inside the fort's headquarters, Colonel James Harrison stood studying a map spread across his desk, pins marking locations across the Colorado Territory. The cavalry officer's perfect posture spoke of West Point training, but the scars on his hands told of frontier battles. "Mr. Reed," Harrison looked up as they entered. "Or should I say, the ghost?" "Just Reed will do, Colonel." "Indeed," Harrison tapped the map. 3 stage stations hit in the past month. Wells Fargo strongboxes cleaned out, but that's not their real purpose. They're hunting men like you, those who testified against corruption during and after the war. Nathaniel placed Sullivan's documents on the desk. "The watchmen." Harrison's eyes narrowed as he examined the papers. "So it's true. We'd heard rumors of an organization, but this..." He held up the list of names. "These men need to be warned." "Already. Lost 4, Ward added grimly. "Good men trying to live quiet lives. Found them with silver eagles pinned to their chests." The implication settled like lead in Nathaniel's stomach. "How many watchmen?" "At least 25 active," Harrison replied, led by former General Marcus Blackwood. Man's got a talent for turning personal grievance into a righteous cause. The name hit Nathaniel like a physical blow. General Blackwood had been Sullivan's commanding officer during the war, the man who had authorized the silver shipment ambush that led to the Silver Creek disaster. Blackwood had escaped prosecution by sacrificing Sullivan, letting his subordinate take the fall while he maintained his respectable facade. "And now you want my help hunting them." It wasn't a question. Ward shifted uncomfortably. "Ain't just about hunting, Reed. These men, the ones on that list, they trust you. Some rode with you during your Pinkerton days. They'll listen if you warn them." "I gave up that life," Nathaniel said firmly. "Found peace in honest work." "Peace?" Ward's voice held an edge. "Tell that to Thomas Burke. Man saved a dozen witnesses from a corrupt judge in '67. Found him 2 weeks ago with a silver eagle in his chest. His wife, too," Harrison pushed a letter across the desk. "This arrived yesterday. General Blackwood sends his regards, says he's coming to Fort Collins personally. Seems Sullivan's death got his attention. Then let your cavalry handle it." "Cavalry can't be everywhere," Harrison replied. "But a stage driver, a man who knows every trail and waterhole between here and Cheyenne, men these old soldiers might trust with their lives, that's worth more than a regiment." Nathaniel stared at the map and the pins marking places where good men had died. "And if I refuse, then we respect your choice," Ward said. "But those names on that list? Their blood's on all our hands if we don't try to save them." A knock at the door interrupted them. A young lieutenant entered, face flushed with urgency. "Colonel, rider from Elkhorn. The watchman hit the Winters homestead, set it ablaze with the family inside." Harrison's face hardened. "Survivors?" Youngest son made it out, said they asked about a man named Reed before they started the fire. The words hung in the air like gunsmoke. Nathaniel felt the weight of his Remington, of his choices, of the lives that might depend on what he decided in this moment. "I'd need conditions," he said finally. Ward and Harrison exchanged glances. "Name them," the colonel replied. "First, I keep driving, best way to move without drawing attention, and I meant what I said about honest work." "Agreed." "Second, we warn these men quietly. No parades, no cavalry patrols drawing attention. Let me handle it my way." Harrison nodded. "Within reason." "Third," Nathaniel's voice hardened, "when we find Blackwood, he's mine. Not the army's, not the law's. This ends the old way, between him and me." Ward started to object, but Harrison raised a hand. "Agreed. But you work with us, Reed. Share what you learn. Coordinate your movements. These watchmen have a network. We need to unravel, not just cut off its head. One more thing." Nathaniel tapped the list of names. "See, some of these men won't want to run. They've built lives like I did. They'll need protection." "Already thought of that," Ward said. "Armies setting up safe havens, places they can bring their families. Harrison's got a plan to make it look like regular homestead settlements." The fort's evening bugle call echoed off the wooden walls. Nathaniel thought of Catherine Hargrove back in Pinewood Station, of Gerald Powell and his son Billy, simple folks living simple lives. Now that peace was threatened, not just for him but for others who had tried to leave the past behind. "I'll need to send word to Pinewood Station," he said. "Let them know I'm still driving the route, but things might get complicated." Harrison began marking new positions on his map. "We'll have men watching the stations, but subtle-like. As far as anyone knows, you're just another stage driver going about his business." "And the watchmen?" Ward asked. "Let them come looking for the ghost," Nathaniel replied grimly. "They might not like what they find." As he left the headquarters, the stars were emerging above Fort Collins's walls. Somewhere out there, General Blackwood and his watchmen were planning their next move, hunting men whose only crime had been standing against corruption in its hour of strength. The stage would roll east tomorrow, back toward Pinewood Station, but now each turn of the wheels would carry more than just mail and passengers. It would carry hope for men marked for death and a reckoning long overdue. Before leaving Fort Collins, Nathaniel made one final stop at the telegraph office. The operator, a gaunt man with ink-stained fingers, looked up from his key with raised eyebrows. "Need to send a message," Nathaniel said, sliding a piece of paper across the desk. "Private wire to Judge Malcolm Foster in Denver." The operator whistled softly as he read the brief message, composed in a cipher unused for years. "Haven't seen this code since the border troubles. Some ghosts need special attention." "Some never really die," Nathaniel replied. Judge Foster had been his handler during his Pinkerton days, coordinating the investigations that had ultimately exposed the corruption at Silver Creek. If anyone could help identify potential watchmen, targets, it would be Foster. The telegraph key began its rhythmic clicking, sending words that would make little sense to anyone intercepting them, but would tell Foster a story of rising dangers and old alliances reforming. Dawn painted Fort Collins's walls amber as Nathaniel readied the eastbound stage for its return journey to Pinewood Station. Unlike yesterday's light passenger load, today's coach carried 4 men who appeared to be ordinary travelers, but whose subtle mannerisms betrayed military training. Marshal Ward's undercover deputies, positioned as protection without drawing. Unwanted attention. Mr. and Mrs. Turner, a silver-haired man, introduced himself and his much younger wife as they boarded. "We're traveling to visit family in Pinewood." Nathaniel recognized the code phrase from his Pinkerton days. These were Judge Foster's people, already responding to last night's telegraph. Capable operatives disguised as an affluent couple. "Weather should hold fair for your visit," he replied with the counter-phrase, securing their luggage. As the Turners settled into the coach alongside Ward's deputies, a commotion drew attention to the fort's gates. A rider approached hard, his horse lathered with sweat. The guards recognized him as one of Harrison's scouts out of Elkhorn. "Marshal!" the rider called, spotting Ward emerging from the headquarters. "Got word from Denver. Judge Foster's chambers were hit last night." Nathaniel's blood ran cold. The judge had been on the watchman's list, but he'd thought there would be more time. "Foster alive?" Ward demanded. "Alive but wounded. Shot twice trying to protect his clerk." The scout handed over a crumpled paper. "Left this pinned to his desk." Nathaniel moved closer as Ward read the message, close enough to see the silver eagle attached to its corner. The words were few, but carried terrible weight. "Justice comes for all traitors. Pinewood awaits." "They're moving faster than we thought," Ward muttered. "Or pushing us to react," Nathaniel replied quietly. "Blackwood knows I'll hear about Foster, knows what it'll do." The marshal studied him. "Are you thinking of changing the plan?" "Plan's already changed," Nathaniel said grimly. "They hit Foster first for a reason. He knew every investigator, every witness, every judge involved in the post-war corruption trials. With him wounded, the entire network's exposed. Every man on that list is in immediate danger," Ward finished, understanding dawning in his eyes. Nathaniel glanced at the stage, where the Turners waited alongside the disguised deputies. More would be coming, he knew, other survivors seeking protection or offering help, but they'd need time to gather, time to rebuild the old connections. "I'm changing route," he decided, taking the high trail through Cherokee territory. Longer, and path but fewer places for ambush. Cherokee territory's its own kind of dangerous. Better Cherokee than Watchman. At least with Cherokee you know where you stand. Nathaniel checked his Remington before climbing to the driver's box. "Send word to Pinewood Station. Have them redirect any special passengers to Elkhorn instead. Safer there. What about you? I'll keep driving. Stay visible. Let Blackwood think his plan's working, that he's herding me toward a confrontation while we move the others to safety behind his lines." Ward nodded slowly, understanding. Risky play. "Man wants to resurrect ghosts." Nathaniel mounted the box, taking up the reins. "Let's give him something to haunt him." The stage rolled out under the strengthening sun, hooves and wheels raising, dust that glowed like gold in the morning light. Inside, the Turners carried messages and plans that would help rebuild the old resistance network. But as they climbed into the foothills above Fort Collins, Nathaniel's thoughts turned to Catherine Hargrove back in Pinewood Station. She'd see through any attempt to hide the truth. Her father had been a federal prosecutor during the war, and she'd inherited his sharp intellect. The question wasn't whether she'd understand, but whether understanding would put her in danger. Blackwood's men would be watching everyone connected to Nathaniel Reed, looking for leverage, for weakness, for ways to force his hand. A glint of metal on a distant ridge caught his eye, sunlight on a spyglass lens, quickly hidden. They were being watched, as he'd expected. The game was already in motion, pieces moving across a board that stretched from Denver to Cheyenne. The Turners were discussing family matters in carefully coded phrases, their words carrying messages about safe houses and warning systems. But Nathaniel heard the tension beneath their practiced calm. They'd lived through the war, seen what men like Blackwood were capable of when their cause turned personal. A raven circled overhead, its shadow crossing the stage like a portent. Nathaniel touched the papers hidden in his coat, the list of names, the coded messages, the map showing Blackwood's suspected movements. Each piece told part of a story, but the whole truth remained elusive. The truth of war, he reflected, was that it never really ended. It just changed shape, traded uniforms for shadows, battlefields for backrooms. But some things remained constant. The cost of standing against corruption, the price of protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. The stage rolled on, each turn of the wheels carrying them deeper into uncertain territory. Behind them, Fort Collins grew small against the horizon. Ahead, the high country waited, where Cherokee shadows moved among the rocks and every trail could lead to sanctuary or ambush. The war wasn't over. It had just been waiting, patient as a rattler in the shade, for the right moment to strike. And now, the poison of old hatreds was spreading again, turning peaceful towns into battlefields. But this time, the ghost wasn't just fighting for justice. He was fighting for the quiet life he'd built, for the people who trusted him, for all those who'd thought the past was finally buried. The ghosts of war might never rest, but neither would the will to stand against them. The stage crested a rise, revealing the vastness of Cherokee country before them. Among the rocks, Nathaniel spotted movement. Native scouts tracking their progress. Unlike Blackwood's men, the Cherokee made no effort to hide their presence. It was their way of announcing terms. Passage would be tolerated, but not guaranteed. Company. Ahead, he called down to his passengers. Through the swirling dust, 3 riders approached. Not Cherokee, but not watchmen either. Nathaniel recognized the lead rider's distinctive posture. "Read!" Captain Jacob Freeman reined up alongside the stage, his buffalo soldiers falling in behind him. The captain's dark face was weathered by years of frontier service. "Marshal Ward said you might come this way. Didn't expect you'd actually try it. Not an escort, I hope. More like a warning. Cherokee aren't the only ones using these trails now. Watchmen have been through here 3 days back, left their mark." He handed up a folded paper, Silver Eagle attached. The message was simple. All debts come due. They're watching the high routes too, Nathaniel realized. Smart money says they're watching everything, Freeman conceded. But they ain't the only ones with eyes. Cherokee remember who helped them during the war, when army contractors tried to cheat them on their treaty provisions. They remember the ghost. The implications settled like lead in Nathaniel's stomach. I can't draw them into this fight, Jacob. Way I hear it, a fight's coming whether we draw lines or not. Blackwood's boys shot up 2 Cherokee families last week, claiming they were harboring federal witnesses. Man starting a war he can't control. The Turners had fallen silent, listening. They understood what this meant. Blackwood wasn't just targeting individuals anymore. He was willing to ignite larger conflicts to achieve his goals. "There's a trading post 3 hours ahead," Freeman continued. "Cherokee call it Shadow Creek. Good place to rest the team if you're of a mind. Might find some friendly faces there." As they approached Shadow Creek, the landscape grew more treacherous, narrow passes winding between towering rocks. Perfect for ambush. But Nathaniel noticed something else, fresh tracks leading away from the main trail, signs of horses being led carefully to hide their numbers. The trading post itself lay in a natural depression sheltered by cottonwoods. As they descended, figures emerged from the shadows, a mix of Cherokee warriors and weather-beaten white men. Nathaniel recognized some faces from the war years, scouts, messengers, men who'd helped expose corruption not out of loyalty to any. A flag, but because they'd seen the darkness in men like Blackwood long before others had. "Long way from your usual route," a gravelly voice called out. Joseph Grey Fox stepped into view, his face lined with years but his eyes sharp as ever. The Cherokee elder had been an ally during the Pinkerton investigations, helping move witnesses to safety when threats emerged. "Usual times are gone," Nathaniel replied. The old scout switched to Cherokee, speaking rapidly to his warriors. They nodded, some mounting up to take watching positions in the hills. "My men will guard the approaches," Grey Fox said. "We have what you would call a common enemy, Mr. Reed." Mrs. Turner emerged from the stage, moving with the careful precision of a woman accustomed to dangerous situations. "We brought what was requested," she gestured to a concealed compartment built into the stage's floor. "Winchester rifles," Grey Fox nodded with approval. "And we bring news. Watchmen are gathering, many bands moving toward Pinewood Station. But they watch the direct routes, expecting you to come that way." "Let them watch," Nathaniel said, "while we move our people through the high country." "Dangerous game," Grey Fox observed, "playing ghost for the ghost hunters. Sometimes the best way to fight shadows is to become one." The Cherokee leader smiled thinly. "You always did understand our ways, Ghost. Perhaps that is why you are still alive." As they rested the team and distributed the weapons, Nathaniel studied the gathering around them, Cherokee warriors and frontier scouts, former lawmen and civilian allies, an alliance born of necessity and sealed with shared enemies. Blackwood's crusade had awakened more than just old hatreds. It had stirred memories of resistance, of times when survival meant standing together against those who would burn the world for their cause. The war wasn't over, but neither was the fight against its darkest legacies. "Riders coming fast," one of the Turner's men called from his lookout position. "From the north." Nathaniel spotted them, 4 horses pushing hard through the scrub. But something was off about their gait. As they drew closer, he saw why. 3 riders were Cherokee warriors, and between them they half-carried a 4th man slumped in his saddle. Grey Fox's hand signal told Nathaniel these were friendlies. He drew the stage to a halt as the riders approached. "Reed," the wounded man croaked, his face pale beneath trail dust. "Thank God." Recognition hit like a physical blow. Daniel Taylor, once one of the most promising young Pinkerton agents Nathaniel had trained, now a territorial deputy marshal. "Watchman," Taylor managed as the Cherokee helped him down. 30, maybe more, moving through Cottonwood Canyon. "They've got prisoners." Mrs. Turner emerged from the stage, medical bag in hand. Her disguise as a society matron hadn't fooled Nathaniel. The way she handled bandages spoke of battlefield experience. "Names?" Nathaniel pressed, while Mrs. Turner worked. Taylor winced as she probed his wound. "Thomas Burke's daughter, she survived the hanging, and Catherine Hargrove from Pinewood Station." The world seemed to tilt beneath Nathaniel's feet. Catherine, the postmistress who'd seen through his quiet facade to the man beneath, who'd become perhaps the closest thing to a friend he'd allowed himself in years. "They hit the station." His voice was deadly calm. "Ambushed her stage on the low road. They knew she'd tried to warn the others on the list." Taylor grabbed Nathaniel's arm. "Blackwood is gathering them all, taking them to Pinewood. Says he's going to hold court. Try them for crimes against the government." His government, one of the Cherokee warriors who'd helped carry Taylor, spoke in his native tongue. Grey Fox had taught Nathaniel enough to understand. The watchmen were changing tactics, taking hostages to force confrontations. "How long?" Nathaniel asked. 3 days until the trial begins. They're moving slow, showing their prisoners in every town they pass, building support for their cause. Mrs. Turner looked up from her bandaging. "We have to warn the others on the list. If Blackwood is really holding a trial," Mr. Turner began. "It won't be a trial," Nathaniel cut in. "It'll be an execution, his way of announcing that the war's starting again." The Cherokee warriors conferred briefly, then their leader stepped forward. He introduced himself as Black Hawk, Grey Fox's son. "My father sends word with us," he said in careful English. "Watchmen have broken peace with Cherokee people, killed our families, burned our camps. We will help you stop them." It was an unprecedented offer. The Cherokee rarely involved themselves in white men's quarrels, preferring to defend their own territories and let others fight their wars. "This is more than a raid," Black Hawk continued, his eyes fixed on Nathaniel. "These watchmen, they want to burn everything that stands against them. Cherokee understands such men. They must be stopped, or they will destroy all peace." Taylor struggled to sit up. "Marshal Ward's gathering men at Elkhorn. Cavalry's ready to move, but they're waiting on word from you, Reed. You know Blackwood, know how he thinks." "And he knows me," Nathaniel replied softly. "I won't let him hurt innocent people. He's counting on that." "It's a trap," Mrs. Turner observed. "Of course it is," Nathaniel nodded. "But sometimes you have to spring a trap to catch the trapper, mister." Turner handed Taylor a canteen. "What's your play, Reed?" Nathaniel studied the harsh landscape around them. Cherokee country had its own rules, its own ways of waging war. Blackwood was expecting him to come charging in with cavalry and marshals, a direct assault on Pinewood, but there were other paths, other ways of fighting. "Black Hawk," he turned to the Cherokee leader, "your warriors know these highlands better than any man alive. Could you get a small group past watchman lines into Pinewood unseen?" The young chief's eyes gleamed with understanding. "Like smoke on the wind. They would never know." "And the cavalry?" Taylor asked. "Let them come the way Blackwood expects, down the main road, flying their colors, while his eyes are fixed on them." Mrs. Turner smiled coldly. "We slip in through the shadows," Nathaniel finished, "along with a few others who know how to move quietly. Men who fought this kind of war before." It was a desperate plan, mixing cavalry charges with Cherokee stealth, formal troops with shadow warriors, the kind of strategy that could either win everything or lose it all in a single night. "Catherine Hargrove," Nathaniel said quietly. "What message did Blackwood send with her?" Taylor pulled a crumpled paper from his shirt. Like the others, a silver eagle was attached, but this message was different. "Come prove your innocence, Ghost. Court convenes at sunset, 3 days hence. Justice will be served." The words might as well have been written in Catherine's blood. Blackwood had chosen his hostage carefully, knowing that the quiet stage driver would risk everything to save her. 3 days, Nathaniel mused. Time enough to gather what we need. Time enough to remind some folks what we're fighting for. Black Hawk barked orders to his warriors. 2 rode east, carrying messages to Grey Fox. The 3rd began scouting their path ahead. "What about the stage?" Mrs. Turner asked. "The regular route ends here," Nathaniel replied. "Time to wake old ghosts of our own." Twilight turned the distant mountains to silhouettes as Nathaniel Reed's unlikely war council gathered in Grey Fox's lodge. The weathered canvas walls were hung with medicine shields and old cavalry maps, creating a fitting backdrop for their desperate planning. Around the central fire, faces from Nathaniel's past and present formed a living timeline of his journey. Cherokee warriors beside U.S. Marshals, frontier scouts alongside Eastern operatives. "Blackwood expects you to come charging in like a hero," Taylor said, studying the rough map they'd sketched in the dirt floor. Despite his wound, the young marshal insisted on participating. "He's positioned scouts here, here, and here." His finger jabbed at the main approaches to Pinewood Station. "Then we don't use those routes," Nathaniel replied. Mr. Turner, who had revealed himself as a former Army intelligence officer, traced alternative paths. "The Cherokee hunting trails could get us within half a mile of town, but then we face open ground." "Not entirely open," Nathaniel corrected. "The abandoned silver mine." Silence fell as the others absorbed the significance. 5 years ago, when Nathaniel first arrived in Pinewood seeking anonymity, he'd spent weeks secretly mapping every tunnel and shaft of the played-out Silverton mine, that honeycomb at the ridge overlooking the town. Old habits of a man who never left survival to chance. Those tunnels collapsed 2 seasons back, one of Ward's deputies objected. The main shaft collapsed, Nathaniel corrected. The secondary tunnels remain accessible if you know where to look. Black Hawk nodded with grudging respect. Even in hiding, the ghost prepared for war. Not war, Nathaniel said softly. Survival. As the night deepened, their strategy crystallized. Marshal Ward's cavalry would approach openly from the east. At sunset on the 3rd day, exactly when Blackwood's court was scheduled to convene. Meanwhile, Cherokee warriors led by Black Hawk would guide Nathaniel and a small strike team through the back country to the mine tunnels, positioning them inside Pinewood before Blackwood realized the trap had been reversed. One problem remains, Mrs. Turner pointed out, her practical mind cutting to the heart of their dilemma. The hostages. Blackwood will kill them at the first sign of attack. All eyes turned to Nathaniel. That's where I come in. Blackwood wants me in that courthouse, wants to make a show of passing judgment. A distraction, Taylor realized. While you keep their attention, Black Hawk continued, we move into position, and when the cavalry hits their lines, we strike from within, Mr. Turner finished, his eyes reflecting the fire's glow. A good plan. Grey Fox spoke for the first time in hours, his weathered face impassive. If it works. If it doesn't. Lot of good people die, Nathaniel acknowledged, including Catherine, Mrs. Turner added gently. Nathaniel's hand tightened imperceptibly on his Remington. She deserves better than being used as bait in Blackwood's vendetta. Then we make sure she survives it, the woman replied, her voice carrying the steel of someone who'd lost too much to war already. All of them. As preparations continued through the night, Nathaniel found a moment of solitude atop a ridge overlooking the camp. The stars wheeled overhead, cold and distant as the justice he'd once believed in so fervently. Footsteps approached. Grey Fox, moving with the silent grace that belied his years. Your mind is troubled, Ghost. Nathaniel didn't turn, just wondering if any of this is worth the price. Which price troubles you more, what others might pay, or what you might become again? The question hung in the night air, uncomfortably precise. Nathaniel had spent 5 years burying the ghost, finding peace in the simple rhythms of a stage driver's life. Now he was deliberate resurrecting that deadly persona, knowing it might consume whatever peace he'd managed to build. Both, he admitted finally. Grey Fox settled beside him, pulling his blanket tighter against the mountain chill. My grandfather told stories of warriors who would hang their weapons on a special tree during times of peace. When they needed to fight again, they would perform a ceremony to reclaim not just the weapon, but the spirit that wielded it. And afterward, the wise ones would return the weapon to the tree, but keep the lessons of the spirit. The old Cherokee studied the stars. You fear becoming the ghost again, but perhaps you never stopped being him. Perhaps the ghost and the stage driver are not separate men, but 2 faces of the same warrior. Before dawn, Nathaniel made his final preparations. The cavalry messenger departed with precise instructions for Marshal Ward. Black Hawk's scouts reported watchman movements, confirming Blackwood's forces were converging on Pinewood. The hours ticked away with agonizing slowness as they waited for darkness to make their move. Taylor approached as Nathaniel checked his Remington one last time. You never asked why, the young marshal said quietly. Why what? Why Blackwood's doing this? Why he's hunting down everyone connected to Silver Creek? Nathaniel continued his methodical inspection. Revenge, power, the usual reasons men like him can't let go. It's more than that. Taylor handed over a folded document. This came from Judge Foster's office before the attack. Blackwood's been buying up land, thousands of acres around abandoned mines, including Silver Creek. Nathaniel unfolded the paper, scanning quickly. These are worthless claims. The silver played out years ago. Not for silver. Taylor's voice dropped lower. For copper. New industrial processes need it by the ton, and those played-out silver mines are sitting on copper deposits worth millions. Foster was investigating Blackwood's land deals when he was shot. The revelation shifted something in Nathaniel's understanding. This wasn't just about old grudges. It was about erasing witnesses to a new crime while disguising it as vengeance. For the past, does Blackwood know you have this? No, Taylor replied, and it might be the only evidence left connecting him to the land scheme. As twilight gathered on the third day, Nathaniel stood at the edge of the forest, overlooking Pinewood Station. Through field glasses borrowed from Turner, he studied the transformed town. Watchmen patrolled the streets, their silver eagles glinting. On their coats, townsfolk moved hurriedly, heads down, while armed men lounged on porch steps and rooftops. The courthouse had been draped with black bunting, a macabre theatre for Blackwood's performance of justice. A platform had been constructed on the steps, not for a trial, Nathaniel noted grimly, but for an execution. "I count 37 watchmen visible," Turner murmured beside him. "More inside, likely." "Too many for a direct assault," Mrs. Turner. "Agreed." Blackhawk materialized from the underbrush, moving with preternatural silence. "The mine entrance is clear. My warriors have found the path you spoke of." Nathaniel lowered the glasses. "Then it's time." The group separated, each taking their assigned positions. Blackhawk led his warriors to surround the town, finding shadow positions where they could strike when signaled. The Turners would infiltrate through the mine tunnels with 4 of Ward's deputies. Emerging behind the courthouse when the time came, Nathaniel would walk in through the front door, alone. As darkness settled fully over the mountain town, he made his way down the main road, his approach deliberate and unhurried. No disguise, no stealth, the ghost returning as Blackwood had demanded. The first watchman spotted him at the edge of town, eyes widening in recognition before he shouted, "The alarm!" Within moments, armed men converged, rifles trained on Nathaniel's steady advance. "That's far enough, Ghost," called a burly man with sergeant's stripes still visible on his faded cavalry jacket. Nathaniel stopped, hands carefully visible. "I'm here to see Blackwood." "Search him," the sergeant ordered. 2 men approached cautiously, relieving Nathaniel of his visible Remington, but missing the derringer concealed at his ankle, exactly as he had anticipated. "General's been expecting you," the sergeant sneered, prodding Nathaniel forward with his rifle barrel. "Got quite a welcome planned." The courthouse square was packed with townsfolk and watchmen, the atmosphere tense with anticipation. As Nathaniel was marched forward, he noted positions, weapons, escape routes, the automatic calculations of a man who had survived a lifetime of danger. At the courthouse steps stood General Marcus Blackwood, resplendent in his pre-war uniform despite the passage of years, tall and imperious with silver hair and a neatly trimmed beard. He looked every inch the aristocratic commander, an image carefully cultivated to mask the corruption beneath. "Nathan Reed," Blackwood's voice carried across the square. "Or do you prefer the Ghost these days?" "Just Reed will do," Nathaniel replied evenly, scanning the platform. His heart clenched when he spotted Catherine among the prisoners, 5 in all, bound to chairs on the makeshift stage. She sat, straight-backed, eyes burning with a mixture of fear and defiance. When she saw Nathaniel, something flashed across her face, not relief, but concern. For him, he realized with a pang. "You're prompt," Blackwood observed, checking an ornate pocket watch. "A commendable trait in a man about to face justice. Is that what you call this circus?" Nathaniel gestured at the platform. Blackwood's smile never reached his eyes. "This, my old adversary, is the reckoning that's been coming since Silver Creek. These people," he waved toward the prisoners, aided and abetted your criminal interference in military matters. Their guilt is established by association. Your definition of military matters included robbing silver shipments and murdering civilians. A murmur ran through the crowd. Even among the watchmen, not all seemed comfortable with Blackwood's methods. Lies spread by Union sympathizers, Blackwood snapped. Tonight we correct the historical record, starting with you. As Blackwood launched into a prepared speech about justice and vindication, Nathaniel surreptitiously checked the positions of Black Hawk's warriors. In the deepening shadows between buildings, he caught glimpses of movement, the Cherokee slipping into their final positions. At the edge of town, the first faint sound of cavalry bugles carried on the evening breeze. Blackwood paused, head tilting slightly. "Your cavalry friends are right on schedule," he said with a thin smile, "but I'm afraid they'll find our welcome rather inhospitable." From the rooftops, watchmen signaled to each other, preparing for the expected frontal assault. "Exactly. As planned. Did you really think I wouldn't anticipate such an obvious strategy?" Blackwood stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I've spent years planning this moment, Ghost. Every contingency, every possible move you might make." "Not every move," Nathaniel replied softly. A sudden commotion erupted at the back of the courthouse, the Turners and their team emerging from the mine tunnel, catching the rear guards completely by surprise. Simultaneously, Black Hawk's signal call split the night air, and Cherokee warriors seemed to materialize from every shadow. The cavalry charge hit the eastern barricades as planned, dividing the watchman's attention in three directions. In the sudden chaos, Nathaniel made his move, a lightning-fast strike that sent the nearest guard sprawling before retrieving his concealed derringer. Blackwood retreated toward the prisoners, drawing a silver-plated revolver. "Stand down, or—" "They die first!" he shouted, aiming at Catherine's head. The courthouse square erupted into pitched battle. Watchmen fired on the advancing cavalry, while others turned to face the Cherokee warriors striking from the shadows. The Turners' team fought their way toward the platform, providing covering fire as Nathaniel closed on Blackwood. "It's over, General," Nathaniel called, advancing steadily despite bullets whining past. "Your men are surrounded, outnumbered, and fighting a battle you can't win. It's never over," Blackwood snarled, his composed facade cracking to reveal the madness beneath. "Silver Creek was just the beginning. Do you have any idea what's at stake? The copper alone is worth millions. Enough to rebuild everything the Union stole from us. Is that why you're killing innocent people? For money? For the cause?" Blackwood's voice rose to a shout. "The same cause these traitors betrayed when they helped you expose our operations." As Nathaniel drew closer, Blackwood's gun shifted. Between the hostages, his eyes wild with desperation. "Stay back, Ghost. I'll kill her, I swear it." Catherine's eyes locked with Nathaniel's. In that silent exchange passed a lifetime of understanding, and something deeper that neither had dared. "Acknowledge. You won't get the chance," Nathaniel said quietly. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Blackwood's finger tightened on the trigger, but before he could fire, Catherine drove her head backward into his stomach, disrupting his aim. The general's shot went wild as Nathaniel lunged forward. Blackwood was former cavalry, trained in close-quarters combat, but Nathaniel Reed had spent a lifetime surviving against impossible odds. They crashed together at the edge of the platform, Blackwood's revolver discharging harmlessly into the air as Nathaniel knocked it aside. "This isn't about justice," Nathaniel hissed as they struggled. "It never was. You're just a thief hiding behind a uniform and a dead cause. The cause never dies." Blackwood's knee caught Nathaniel in the ribs, sending pain lancing through his old wound. "Men like you can never understand what we lost, what was taken from us." Around them, the battle was turning. The watchmen, caught in the three-pronged attack, began surrendering or fleeing into the night. Mr. Turner and Black Hawk had reached the hostages, cutting them free as Mrs. Turner provided covering fire with deadly precision. Blackwood saw his plans collapsing and fought with the desperate fury of a cornered animal. His boot connected with Nathaniel's derringer, sending it spinning away into the darkness. A hidden knife appeared in his hand, slashing toward Nathaniel's throat. "You took everything from me at Silver Creek," Blackwood snarled. "My reputation, my future, everything. You sacrificed Sullivan to save yourself," Nathaniel countered, blocking the knife. "Left your own men to hang while you played the innocent commander." The accusation struck deeper than any physical blow. For a moment, Blackwood's guard dropped, just enough for Nathaniel to twist the knife away, reversing its direction. The blade sank home, and Blackwood's eyes widened in shock. "The real tragedy," Nathaniel said softly as the general sagged against him, "is that you could have rebuilt honestly, found real peace instead of nursing old hatreds." "Peace," Blackwood whispered, blood staining his immaculate uniform. "There is no peace for men like us, Ghost. Only different battlefields." As the general's life ebbed away, the gunfire around them gradually fell silent. The battle for Pinewood Station was ending. The watchmen routed, the hostages safe, the town reclaimed. But as Nathaniel gently lowered Blackwood's body to the ground, he wondered if the dead man's final words might hold a bitter truth. Catherine reached him first, her hands still raw from the ropes, but her spirit unbroken. "Nathaniel," she said simply, using his given name for the first time. Before he could respond, Marshal Ward pushed through the gathering crowd, his face grim but satisfied. "It's done, Reed. Watchmen are surrendering all across the territory." Blackwood's death broke their spirit. "Not all of them," Nathaniel cautioned, wiping blood from a cut on his forehead. "Some will try to rebuild." "Let them try," Blackhawk said, materializing beside them. "We will be watching, all of us." As the town slowly emerged from hiding, Nathaniel found himself surrounded by an unlikely alliance. Cherokee warriors standing alongside cavalry troopers, frontier scouts helping tend wounded watchmen, townsfolk reclaiming their streets with cautious hope. Grey Fox approached, studying the aftermath with ancient eyes. "The battle ends, but the vigilance continues." Nathaniel nodded, feeling the weight of the derringer that Taylor had retrieved and returned to him. "Some wars never truly end." "No," the old Cherokee agreed, "but perhaps some warriors find better causes to serve." As dawn broke over Pinewood Station, Nathaniel stood by the stage depot, watching the town come back to life. Cavalry patrols had moved out, tracking down the scattered remnants of Blackwood's organization. The Turners were coordinating with Taylor to secure evidence of the copper scheme, ensuring that justice would be served through courts rather than gunfire this time. Catherine joined him, carrying fresh coffee. "The morning stage still needs to run," she said with quiet determination. "Mail doesn't deliver itself." Nathaniel took the offered cup, studying her face in the early light. "After everything that's happened, you still want things to go back to normal?" "Not back," she corrected. "Forward. But some routines anchor us while others change around them." He understood what she meant. The ghost would always be part of him, just as the stage driver had become equally essential to his identity. Not separate men, as Grey Fox had suggested, but facets of the same complex soul. "What will you do now?" she asked. "The army's offered you a position, Marshal Ward too." Nathaniel looked toward the waiting stage, freshly hitched and ready for the day's journey. "I think I'll keep driving," he said simply, "at least for a while." Catherine's smile held understanding beyond words. Some legends work better quietly. As the morning stage rolled out under the rising sun, Nathaniel Reed felt the weight of his Remington, once again concealed but never forgotten. Behind them, Pinewood Station began rebuilding, its people forever changed by the battle they had witnessed. Ahead, the mountain trails stretched toward distant horizons, carrying mail, memories, and the vigilance of a man who had found his true purpose, not in violence, but in the protection of the peace he had helped restore. The ghost would always be there, watching from the shadows when needed, but for now the stage driver had a route to run and miles to go before the day was done. 1 year after the battle at Pinewood Station, Nathaniel Reed stood in the morning stillness, watching sunlight creep across the newly constructed town square. The courthouse had been rebuilt, not as Blackwood's theatre of vengeance, but as a true hall of justice, its foundation stones inscribed, with the names of those who had stood against corruption during the territory's darkest days. Pinewood had changed in ways both subtle and profound. Where once a quiet stage depot had served a scattered community, now a thriving town stretched along the valley floor. New buildings of dressed stone replaced hasty frontier constructions. The stage station had expanded to accommodate increased traffic, with 6 daily runs connecting Pinewood to a growing network of settlements. "Admiring your handiwork?" Catherine Hargrove approached, carrying the morning mail pouch. No longer just a postmistress, she now served as the town's elected mayor, the first woman to hold such office in the territory. "Hardly my doing," Nathaniel replied, though they both knew better. After Blackwood's defeat, the evidence Taylor had safeguarded exposed not just the copper scheme, but a vast network of land fraud stretching across 3 territories. The subsequent investigations had recovered millions in stolen funds, much of which had been directed toward rebuilding communities damaged by the Watchmen. Pinewood, as the site of the final confrontation, had received special attention from territorial authorities eager to showcase justice restored. "Special delivery today," Catherine said, handing him an official-looking envelope. "From Judge Foster's office in Denver." Nathaniel broke the wax seal, scanning the contents quickly. "The last of Blackwood's lieutenants has been sentenced, 20 years at Leavenworth, so it's truly finished." He refolded the letter thoughtfully. "The legal proceedings, yes, but there's more to justice than courtrooms." They walked together toward the expanded stage depot, where Nathaniel's morning run to Cherokee Pass awaited. Unlike the solitary preparations of the past, the yard bustled with activity, drivers checking harnesses, clerks sorting mail, passengers gathering for various destinations. What had once been a tenuous outpost was now a crucial hub, connecting the territory's disparate communities. Among the station workers, Nathaniel noted faces that would have been enemies a year ago. Former watchmen who had accepted amnesty in exchange for testimony, now rebuilding their lives through honest labor. Elsewhere, Cherokee traders mingled freely with settlers, their traditional distrust gradually yielding to cautious cooperation. "Ryder Cumming," called young Billy Powell, now a gangly 16-year-old serving as station manager's apprentice. Flying marshal's colors. The approaching horseman proved to be Taylor, his previous wounds healed, but leaving him with a permanent limp. The young lawman had earned rapid promotion after Blackwood's defeat, now serving as Ward's chief deputy across the expanded territory. "Reed," he greeted, dismounting stiffly. "Mrs. Mayor, just Catherine, Daniel," she corrected with a smile. "We've been through too much for formalities." Taylor produced a small wooden box. "Thought you might want this." Marshal Ward had it made special. Inside lay a silver star mounted on leather, an official deputy marshal's badge. Unlike the traditional design, this one had been modified with a subtle ghost etched into the metal, visible only when caught in the right light. "The offer still stands," Taylor said quietly. "Territory needs men who understand justice beyond the letter of the law." Nathaniel studied the badge without touching it. "Still got a route to drive." "Could do both," Taylor persisted. "Special. Deputy status. Called in when needed. Free to drive stage between." Catherine watched the exchange silently, but her eyes spoke volumes. She had never pushed Nathaniel to accept any of the numerous offers that had come his way after Blackwood's defeat. Army scout positions, Pinkerton reinstatement, private security for mining concerns. She understood, perhaps better than anyone, his need to maintain the quiet life he'd built while acknowledging the skills that made him unique. "I'll think on it," Nathaniel finally replied, closing the box. As Taylor departed, the morning stage stood ready for its run. But unlike the solitary journeys of the past, today's coach carried special significance. Seated inside were representatives from 3 Cherokee bands, traveling to Denver for the signing of a new territorial treaty, one that recognized their sovereignty over ancestral lands while establishing formal trade relationships with neighboring settlements. "Important cargo today," Catherine observed. "Just folks needing to get somewhere," Nathaniel replied, though the subtle tightening around his eyes betrayed his awareness of the journey's historical significance. As he climbed to the driver's box, Catherine touched his arm lightly. "You know, some people still tell stories about the ghost," she said, "but they're different now. Not about the gunman, but about the guardian, about the man who chose to protect rather than avenge." "Better story that way," Nathaniel agreed. "More useful." The morning stage rolled out under brightening skies, 6 horses moving in perfect unison beneath Nathaniel's expert handling. Inside the coach, the Cherokee representatives discussed final treaty points in their native language, occasionally switching to English to include the territorial official accompanying them. The ease of this cultural exchange would have been unthinkable before Blackwood's defeat, when ancient suspicions kept communities isolated from one another. As they passed the town limits, Nathaniel noticed the changes in the surrounding landscape. New homesteads dotted the previously empty valley floor, their fields green with spring wheat. Where game trails had once wound through untouched wilderness, proper roads now stretched toward distant communities, their construction a joint effort between settlers and Cherokee work teams. Near Eagle Creek, site of his first confrontation with the watchman, a new trading post had been established. Its porch bustled with activity as Cherokee hunters traded pelts for manufactured goods while settler children learned native games from their Cherokee counterparts. The building's sign, carved in both English and Cherokee, proclaimed it Harmony Trading Company. Blackhawk stood on the porch, supervising the day's business. The young Cherokee leader had transformed from warrior to merchant with remarkable adaptability, becoming a crucial bridge between cultures. Spotting the approaching stage, he raised a hand in greeting, the gesture carrying the weight of shared battles and hard-won trust. "Trade is better than war," he called as Nathaniel drew the team to a brief halt. "Learned that from your father?" Hawk smiled. "No, from watching you, Ghost. You fought when necessary, but built when possible." The observation struck deeper than any compliment Nathaniel had received in the year since Blackwood's defeat. He had never considered himself a builder, only a survivor who occasionally protected others. Yet looking at the trading post and the communities it served, he recognized that protection could take many forms beyond the barrel of a gun. As the stage continued toward Cherokee Pass, Nathaniel felt the presence of his Remington still carried, but rarely drawn now. The weapon had been transformed, much like the man who carried it, no longer primarily an instrument of death, but a last resort guardian of the peace many hands had worked to build. Near midday, they crested the final ridge, before Cherokee Pass, where the territorial boundary stone marked the edge of his regular route. From this vantage point, the landscape unfolded in breathtaking scope, mountains giving way to foothills, then to distant plains stretching toward the horizon. Scattered throughout were the signs of civilization, distant smoke from homestead, chimneys, the glint of new church steeples, the dark line of railroad construction advancing from the east. "Quite a view," observed the territorial official, leaning from the coach window. "Getting more crowded by the day," Nathaniel replied, though without the bitterness such an observation might once have carried. The oldest of the Cherokee representatives, a weathered elder named Standing Bear, studied Nathaniel with knowing eyes. Our stories say the land remembers those who walk upon it, both the harm done and the healing brought. This land remembers you, ghost who drives. The title, somewhere between acknowledgement and respect, settled over Nathaniel like an unexpected mantle. Where once he had been simply the ghost, now this elder recognized the duality he had embraced. The protector who could hunt like a spirit, but who chose instead to connect communities through the humble work of a stage driver. As they descended toward Cherokee Pass, Nathaniel reflected on the year's transformations. The ghost still existed, ready when needed, but no longer driven by the haunted desperation of the past. The stage driver had expanded beyond a mere disguise to become an essential service connecting fragile communities. And somewhere between these identities lived the man himself, Nathan Reed, neither fully the legend nor simply the workman, but something more complex and ultimately more human than either alone could embody. Some ghosts never truly fade, Standing Bear said quietly, as if reading Nathaniel's thoughts. But the wise ones learn to walk in daylight, among the living. The stage rolled on, wheels marking time like a heartbeat beneath the vast western sky. Behind them, Pinewood Station continued its transformation from frontier outpost to thriving community. Ahead, Cherokee Pass awaited with its own changes and challenges. And between them moved Nathaniel Reed, carrying mail, memories, and the quiet vigilance that had become his true legacy. The ghost would always be there, watching from the shadows when needed. But for now, and for as many tomorrows as possible, the stage had a route to run and people who depended on its arrival. Some legends never die, they just find better ways to serve. Decades later, when railroads had replaced most stagecoach routes and the frontier had given way to statehood, stories of the ghost lingered in the collective memory of the western territories. They were told around campfires and pot-bellied stoves, whispered in saloons, and recounted in the pages of dime novels that romanticized the West's wild years. But in the small museum that now occupied Pinewood's original stage depot, a different version of the legend persisted. Among the carefully preserved artifacts, a stagecoach wheel, faded route maps, a collection of well-worn harnesses, hung a simple framed photograph that drew visitors' curious gazes. The sepia image showed an elderly man seated beside an equally elderly woman on the porch of a modest homestead. His face was deeply lined, weather-beaten by decades under western skies, but his eyes remained sharp beneath bushy white brows. The woman's expression carried both strength and serenity, her hand resting lightly on his arm in a gesture of quiet companionship. Behind them stood a mixed group, settlers and Cherokee, young and old, all connected through some unspoken bond to the seated couple. "That's them," the museum's elderly curator would tell visitors who inquired. Nathan and Catherine Reed, taken on their 50th anniversary in 1917. Invariably, some visitor would ask, "Is he really the famous ghost?" The curator, who happened to be Billy Powell's granddaughter, would smile enigmatically. Some say he was, though he never confirmed it himself. What's certain is that he drove the Pinewood stage for 43 years, through blizzards and heat waves, never missing a scheduled run until his eyesight began to fail. She would then point to other photographs showing Reed at various stages of his long career, receiving commendations from territorial governors, standing with Cherokee leaders at treaty signings, instructing young drivers in the vanishing art of handling a 6-horse team. But what about the gunfights? The showdown with General Blackwood? Persistent visitors would press, disappointed by these mundane images of an ordinary working man. History has a way of remembering the violent moments while forgetting the quiet. Years of building that followed, the curator would reply, gesturing toward the window where modern Pinewood spread across the valley. This town exists because of what he and Catherine did after the gunsmoke cleared, the mail routes they established, the trade agreements they fostered between settlers and native peoples, the justice system they helped build. For those genuinely interested, she would open a glass case containing Reed's personal effects donated after Catherine's death in 1919. Among them lay a stage driver's timepiece, a worn route book with meticulous notations spanning decades, and most intriguing to visitors, a Remington 1875 revolver with distinctive ivory grips, unfired for so many years that its action had frozen solid. He carried this every day of his driving career, she would explain, but according to local records, he only drew it once after the Blackwood incident, to stop a runaway horse that threatened a group of school children. He fired into the ground to turn the animal, then immediately returned the weapon to its holster. Some visitors would depart disappointed, having expected tales of a traditional Western gunslinger. Others, more thoughtful, lingered over the documents in the adjoining display, the treaty that had brought lasting peace between settlers and Cherokee, bearing Reed's signature as witness. Property deeds showing how former enemies had become neighbors, newspaper accounts of the copper mining operations that eventually brought prosperity to the region under joint ownership by settler and Cherokee cooperatives. Most compelling was a letter written by Reed himself in his final years, in response to a dime novelist seeking to dramatize the Ghost's bloody exploits. The West was not built by men who excelled at killing, though such stories sell more papers than the truth. It was built by those who remained after the fighting stopped, those who delivered the mail, taught the children, tended the sick, and found ways for different peoples to live together without bloodshed. If you wish to honor the real heroes of our shared history, write about them instead. In the town cemetery on the hillside, overlooking modern Pinewood, two simple headstones stood side by side beneath a spreading oak. No mention of the ghost appeared on Nathaniel Reed's marker. Only the dates of his long life and the words, "He delivered what was entrusted to him." Catherine Stone bore a similar simplicity. She built bridges where others saw only chasms. Each spring, descendants of the Cherokee bands would journey to leave tokens of remembrance, eagle feathers, carved stones, small bundles of sacred herbs. Settlers' descendants brought their own tributes, fresh-cut flowers, small American flags, handwritten notes of gratitude. The mingling of these offerings created a living tapestry connecting past to present, a visual testament to what one man had understood, that lasting peace requires both vigilance against those who would destroy it and the daily work of building, something worth protecting. In the modern town below, few residents could recite the details of Reed's legendary gunfight with Blackwood. But all knew that their mail arrived on time, that their Cherokee neighbors were partners rather than adversaries, and that justice in their courthouse applied equally to all. These everyday realities, the true legacy of the silent sentinel, endured. Long after the echo of gunshots had faded from memory. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.